She has been married to the heir of the Beijing elite for 5 years, and everyone says he dotes on her to the bone, even willing to give his life for her. But because she has been unable to conceive, her in-laws have gone from subtle hints to outright pressure. The man who promised to protect her for a lifetime on their wedding day shed tears. "Darling, I can't hold on any longer. A man's promise is so short-lived." Within 2 months, she saw him carefully supporting a pregnant woman. They appeared at the prenatal checkup department. "My baby will surely look a lot like his father when he grows up, with dashing eyebrows and starry eyes, a handsome and spirited appearance. Perhaps he'll even have a red mole at the corner of his eye, just like his father." The boastful female voice was particularly grating in the quiet hallway, drawing sidelong glances from others. Margaret couldn't help but take a couple of looks at the woman too. The woman was wearing a mask. But the unconcealable pride in her eyes was unmistakable. Listening to the woman describe her baby's future, Margaret couldn't help but think of another person, her husband of 5 years, the famously prominent Crown Prince, Ronald. There was also a red tear mole at the corner of his eye. Just as she wanted to step forward and ask, the broadcast called her name. Across the table, the doctor holding her examination report looked grave, making Margaret clench her hands involuntarily. Her heart feeling as if it were being squeezed by a large hand, making it hard to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor's verdict reached her ears. "MS, Margaret, all your current physical indicators are normal. As for why you haven't been able to get pregnant all these years, we're not sure either. Perhaps further examinations could be done." Margaret couldn't hear anything else. "Margaret," the doctor said after that. Her mind was filled with the thought that her body was normal, yet she hadn't been able to conceive all these years. After leaving the consultation room, Margaret sat dazedly on a nearby chair, staring at the test report in her hands, tear by tear, slowly soaking through the paper. She and Ronald grew up together since childhood. Like childhood sweethearts, everyone in their circle knew that she was his white moonlight, an existence not to be desecrated. Margaret at the age of 17. He called her under the phoenix tree, and under the moonlight, blushing, he took out the hundreds of love letters he had written over the years and stammeringly confessed his feelings to her. Margaret had just turned 20, the legal marriage age, and he couldn't wait to propose to her that very day, simply because he said, "Margaret, I'm afraid if I'm even a moment slower, someone else will take you away," because she disliked being the center of attention. And because he wanted to protect her completely, their wedding banquet was only attended by close friends and family, with very few people outside their circle knowing about it. But this didn't affect Ronald's love for her, especially after she found out she had been unable to get pregnant. He consistently comforted her, taking the blame upon himself. He even stood firmly in front of her when her in-laws pressured her, coldly stating that he didn't want children. He warned them that if they continued to pressure her, he would give up his position as the heir. Margaret was deeply moved but also filled with guilt. In her desperation to conceive as soon as possible, she began trying various folk remedies, eventually becoming a regular at the hospital's obstetrics and gynecology department. But 5 years passed, and there was still no sign of a pregnancy. She walked out of the hospital, took out her phone, and wanted to call Ronald. She really wanted to see him right now, to have him hold her, but then she suddenly remembered that he was still at work, so she put away her phone and decided to take a taxi to his company to find him. Margaret had just entered the company when she saw a man ahead whose back looked very much like Ronald, carefully helping a pregnant woman up the stairs. "Ronald," she tentatively called out. "Ronald," and he instinctively turned his head. Upon seeing her, his body stiffened slightly. He quickly said something to the woman beside him, and after the woman left, he descended the stairs, walked up to her, and blocked her line of sight. Margaret couldn't help but wonder why he was so nervous. "Who was that just now?" Ronald remained calm. "Just a passerby. I saw she was pregnant and having difficulty, so I gave her a hand." Since childhood, Ronald has always had a strong sense of boundaries, never touching any woman other than her. Even the secretaries in his company are all male. In their social circle, people called him a wife slave, but he didn't feel embarrassed and openly admitted it. "Yes, I am a wife slave. I'm allergic to all women except Margaret." How could someone so indifferent to other women reach out to comfort a pregnant woman? But her doubts were quickly interrupted by Ronald, who said, "By the way, what did the doctor say about the test results?" A flicker of disappointment flashed in her eyes. And the grievance she had just managed to suppress resurfaced, making the corners of her eyes moist again. He instantly realized something and pulled her into his arms, gently patting her back to comfort her, saying, "It's okay, sweetheart, I've told you before, don't put so much pressure on yourself about getting pregnant. I'm completely fine without children. To me, you are the most important person. Don't cry. It breaks my heart to see you like this." After saying this, He affectionately wiped away the tear still clinging to the corner of her eye with his thumb, then leaned down to kiss her. It took a while before his tenderness soothed her emotions, and she finally reached out to hold his large hand in return. After returning to the villa, Ronald went straight into the bathroom, leaving her sitting alone by the bed, about to put the medical report into the drawer. Suddenly, a text message notification rang out, causing her hand to freeze mid-motion as she was placing the report away. Her body trembled involuntarily. It took a long while before she finally took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and opened the message. Sure enough, it was yet another Ronald's mom pressing her about having a baby. Ever since she couldn't get pregnant, Ronald's mom would text her every few days, asking if she had gone for checkups and when she could conceive a child. So much so that whenever she heard the notification sound of a text message, she would feel inexplicably nervous and fearful, until the phone screen went dark. Margaret closed her eyes, struggled internally for a while, then reopened them, opened the wardrobe, and took out the dress she had kept hidden at the bottom. The bathroom door was quietly pushed open, and a pair of delicate hands wrapped around him from behind. Ronald, his body stiffened. Before he could turn around, Margaret slowly buried her head into the crook of his neck, gently nuzzling him with her soft lips. Ronald, I want. A flicker of heartache passed through the man's eyes. Darling, you don't have to be like this. We're not in a hurry about having a child. Her slender fingers trailed downward along his abdomen, and the man's breath hitched. But I want it now. Ronald, his eyes darkened as he scooped her up by the waist, tossed her onto the bed, and pressed his body over hers. Burning kisses fell one after another, their breaths growing heavier and heavier. Goodness, at that moment, a sudden ringtone broke the silence, but Ronald paid no heed, his dense kisses continuing to trail down her shoulders and neck. Gasping for breath, she pushed him lightly. Ronald. The phone. Ronald still ignored the phone, just pulling her back abruptly. Forget about that. Focus. The piercing ringtone continued to blare, finally shattering the ambiguous atmosphere completely. Ronald soothed her with a kiss on the forehead. I'll be right back after taking this call. After saying that, he picked up his phone and walked outside. Margaret also stood up and walked towards the balcony. No matter how big or small the matter, Ronald never takes calls behind her back. What kind of call would make him hide it from her? Just as she was about to push open the balcony door, Ronald pushed it open first. He frowned, softly coaxing the person on the other end of the line. When he saw her approaching, he covered the receiver and looked at her apologetically, saying, Sweetie, there's an emergency at the company. I have to go right away. Without waiting for her response, he snatched the keys from the table and vanished into the night. Margaret, the light in her eyes instantly dimmed, and a bitter taste welled up in her heart. Ronald, he rarely came home after taking over the company. The time they spent sharing a bed was also very little. Now the hard-won opportunity has turned into a bubble in the blink of an eye. She stood there in a daze for quite a while before finally bending down to pick up the scattered clothes from the floor. Just as she was carrying the clothes to the laundry room, a slip of paper fell out of Ronald's pocket. Margaret was about to pick it up, but after seeing the words on it, her pupils suddenly constricted, and her heart began to pound wildly. The words pregnancy test report abruptly caught her eye, and in the section for family member's signature, was clearly written Ronald. With a buzzing in her ears, she could hear nothing else. Trembling, she picked up the pregnancy test form. At first, Margaret thought she might have mistaken the person. After all, there are so many people with the same name in this world. But after looking carefully for a long time, she could no longer deceive herself. Since childhood, her report cards had always been signed by Ronald, so she was most familiar with Ronald's handwriting. Suddenly, she remembered one time when Ronald's mom, after urging her to have a child, said to her, If you really can't have one, then I'll have my son find someone else to have a child with. Anyway, I must hold a grandson this year. So Ronald really went and had a child with someone else. Margaret quickly dismissed that thought. How could that be possible? He loved her so much. Ronald's mom, when she told him to have a child with someone else, he was so furious he almost smashed the entire villa. Absolutely impossible. My Ronald's child can only be born from Margaret's womb. So angry that Ronald's dad pointed at him and called him a bastard. But Ronald's name was clearly printed on the prenatal checkup form. Amidst constant suspicion and self-doubt, she took out her phone wanting to call him, but then she remembered how he had hurriedly left. And she was afraid of disturbing him. What if he really had something urgent to attend to? In the end, Margaret put down her phone and tucked away the pregnancy test results. She tossed and turned all night, having slept poorly all night and with the balcony door not properly closed. Margaret woke up feeling feverish all over, her eyes so heavy it felt like she could barely open them. Groping for her phone on the nightstand, she dialed Ronald's number. He didn't answer over a dozen calls in a row. Just as she was about to give up, the call connected. "Ronald, who are you?" After answering, a charming female voice came from the other end. With a thud, her phone immediately fell to the ground. There was chaos on the other end of the line, and it took a while before Ronald's voice came through. "Baby." He called out to her several times before she finally bent down to pick up the phone, asking in disbelief, "Who was that just now?" Ronald quickly explained, "No one. I was just discussing a project, and my partner picked up the wrong phone by mistake. Don't misunderstand." Before she could question him further, he changed the subject. "What's wrong? Did you need something?" Margaret was about to say that she had a fever and ask if he could come back to take her to the hospital. "So hot." A sudden scream came from the other end, and he sounded slightly anxious as he quickly ended the call. "I have something to deal with here. I have to go." The call ended abruptly. Perhaps because she was feeling unwell from the fever, a wave of grievance instantly overwhelmed her. He had never hung up on her before, even during urgent meetings. He would always soothe her before ending the call. But now, she lay in bed feeling miserable for a while before stumbling out to get some cold medicine from the first aid kit as a quick fix. Then she drifted back into a hazy sleep. When Margaret opened her eyes again, she found herself lying in a hospital bed. Beside her, Ronald, seeing her wake up, relaxed his gaze and held her in his arms. "Darling, you scared me to death." It turned out that Ronald had called her back later, only to find that she hadn't been answering. Feeling that something was wrong, he hurriedly drove back to the villa and saw her sleeping in bed with a flushed face. Terrified, he immediately rushed her to the hospital. For the rest of the day, he stayed by her side without leaving for a moment. Afraid that something might happen to her again, watching him bustling about for her, a warmth spread through her heart, and she felt as if the man he used to be had returned. But just then, his phone rang again. Ronald paused with the phone in his hand, glanced at her, and then turned away to answer the call in the corridor. This time, the soundproofing in the hospital corridor wasn't very good. A coquettish female voice faintly came from the other end of the phone. "I don't care. I want you to come and keep me company right now, otherwise, I'll run away from home with your son. Don't you believe me?" Ronald not only showed no trace of impatience on his face, but instead looked at her with adoration as he coaxed, "I have something to handle here. I'll come to keep you company as soon as I'm done." Perhaps he was too focused on the person on the other end of the call to notice the shock on her face behind him. Margaret couldn't believe her ears, as if struck by a bolt from the blue, or as if drenched from head to toe with a basin of cold water. Her entire body began to tremble uncontrollably. What had she just heard? Was she hallucinating, running away from home with Ronald's son, thinking of the pregnancy test results she'd seen last time, then the pregnant woman he'd helped last time, then the words she'd overheard in the prenatal checkup department the time before that? Her hand gripping the blanket tightened more and more, but just then, the hospital room door was pushed open again. She quickly closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep. Seeing her like this, Ronald breathed a sigh of relief, kissed her forehead, and quietly left the room. The next second, Margaret quickly opened her eyes, pulled out the 4-drip, and secretly followed behind him. She watched him turn left and right, until he finally arrived at the obstetrics and gynecology department. Just as she was about to get closer, Ronald tightly embraced a girl who had just come out of the prenatal checkup room, gently coaxing her. "Was the baby good today? Did it trouble mommy?" Her eyes instantly widened, and the girl who was acting spoiled in Ronald's arms also lifted her head. As if sensing something, he lifted his gaze in her direction. It was then that she finally saw the girl clearly. That face was so much like her own when she was young. In that instant, the whole world fell silent. She felt an invisible hand tightly gripping her heart, as if trying to tear it out of her chest, making it impossible for her to breathe from the pain. She stood frozen to the ground, staring blankly as Ronald held that girl, comforting her over and over, kissing her, and finally disappeared from her sight while talking and laughing. Ronald was seeing someone else. This was the only thought left in her mind. The pouring rain drenched her entire body, yet she seemed to feel nothing. Stumbling along in the downpour, her eyes were hollow and vacant, her mind endlessly replaying that glaring scene from moments before. 12 years, a full 12 years. Aside from her parents, Ronald was the person who treated her best in the world. He was so good that she felt simply meeting him must have used up all her luck. The boy who, in the middle of the night, climbed through her window, his eyes shining with confidence as he promised to always be good to her. The one who shielded her tightly with his body when she was surrounded by thugs. The one who steadfastly stood in front of her, protecting her, when she was being verbally abused and pressured to have children by Ronald's mom. How did it come to this? To think that the one who once had only her in his eyes now has someone else in his gaze. To think that the lips that once kissed only her are now entangled with another woman. To think that the hands that once caressed only her body are now wandering over another woman, a sharp pain surged through her chest, as if it were tearing her heart apart. The villa was unlit, its oppressive and heavy atmosphere tightly trapping the person curled up on the floor, yet Margaret seemed completely numb, mechanically scrolling through her phone as she looked at the information the butler had sent her. It turned out that ever since it was confirmed she couldn't get pregnant, Ronald's mom had been constantly urging him to find another woman to have a child with. Ronald, because he loved her too much, he repeatedly refused Ronald's mom's demands, but in the end, Ronald's mom started threatening him by slitting her wrists, over and over, until she finally lay in the bathtub covered in blood, and so, he painfully gave in. In the end, he chose Megan. A girl who bore an 80% resemblance to her but lived at the bottom of society. Ronald chose this girl for two reasons. First, because Megan resembled her, and any child they had would surely look like her. Second, Megan had neither power nor money, making her easy to dismiss later. Initially, out of love and guilt, Ronald had never touched Megan, intending only for IVF, until one time he was plied with too much alcohol by a business partner. He mistook Megan for her, leading to a night of wild abandon. And that night was her birthday. On her birthday, her husband was in bed with another woman. Margaret cried and laughed, not knowing whether she was crying for her own misery or laughing at his so-called deep affection. In the beginning, he was the one who said it didn't matter if they had no children. Darling, having you is enough for me. But later, it was also him who ended up in bed with another woman for the sake of having a child. Ronald, oh Ronald. Is this what you meant when you said you loved me so much you'd even give up your life? If he really couldn't hold on any longer and wanted a child, he could have openly told her about it. Although it would have been painful for her, she would have taken the initiative to divorce and step out of his world. But he should never have said he loved her while also having a child with another woman, creating a new family of 3. Margaret put down her phone with trembling hands and looked up at this love nest she shared with Ronald. This home was filled, bit by bit, with evidence of all the love they had shared. Back then, her eyes were brimming with happiness, and she even told him that when she grew old, they would pass this house on to their children, so they could continue this legacy of happiness. But now, she only found it glaring, so she took a hammer from the toolbox and smashed it hard against the wedding photo on the wall, smashing the furniture that she and Ronald had bought together for this home, smashing all the Ronald gifts he had given her over the years. Smash them all to pieces, a complete mess. This was Ronald's first reaction after opening the door. The entire hall was smashed beyond recognition, and amidst the broken items, Margaret sat on the floor, her head buried in her knees. He didn't bother to ask why, rushing over to embrace her. Sweetheart, are you hurt? Margaret looked up at him. The tension and concern in his eyes couldn't be faked in the slightest, making it impossible to associate the deeply affectionate man before her with the one who had cheated on her behind her back. She pushed him away abruptly and spoke coldly. Megan, who is she? Ronald, his eyes quickly filled with shock, his thin lips turning pale. What Megan? I don't know her. Margaret, but she smiled bitterly and threw the prenatal checkup form at him. You don't know her? Huh, well then, why is your name signed on this prenatal checkup form? His body trembled violently, and his breath caught in an instant. Darling, the person before him wiped away tears fiercely with a hand, speaking word by word. Ronald, I know everything now, don't lie to me anymore, let's get a divorce. Ronald was completely flustered, holding her tightly as he spoke with a trembling voice. No, I don't want a divorce. Margaret looked up at him, her heart filled with irony. But you're dirty now, and I find it disgusting. His face turned pale. That was an accident. Margaret, I only touched her once. I'm not dirty, but in my eyes, you are dirty. You betrayed me. You betrayed our relationship. She closed her eyes in resignation. Let's get a divorce. Ronald, let's part on good terms. Ronald immediately hugged her. Margaret, don't divorce me. As long as you don't divorce me, I'll agree to anything you say. Margaret shook her head. Your promises mean nothing to me anymore. I'm letting you go, so please let me go too. With that, she turned and left, watching her retreating figure. His trembling fingers clutched his chest as if trying to squeeze out the inner agony, yet he only felt an even more intense pain. Margaret, do you really have to leave me? Yes. She closed her eyes, trying hard to control her emotions. The man could no longer hold back. He took a deep breath and ordered a servant nearby. Someone, take my wife back to her room. No one is to let her out without my command. She turned back in disbelief, looking at him. Ronald, are you going to imprison me? He shook his head. Not imprisonment. Just want you to calm down. Margaret, be good. She looks like you, and the child she gives birth to will also look like you. After she gives birth to the child, I will send her away. And we'll pretend nothing happened, living as we did before. Okay, Margaret found it utterly absurd. He had a child with someone else, and he expected her to pretend nothing happened. She looked at him in despair. It's impossible. From the moment you had a child with her, we can never go back to the way things were. Ronald shuddered all over, his face deathly pale, but still insisted stubbornly, it's all right, Margaret. We have plenty of time. After saying that, he directly waved his hand and had the servant escort her back to her room. Keep a close watch on the lady. No one is allowed to see her except for me. Ever since Margaret was imprisoned, she had completely given up on Ronald. Looking at the heavily guarded old mansion, she had thought of countless ways to escape. The most successful time, she disguised herself as a servant and rode out in a car, but just as she reached the main gate, Ronald's car pulled directly in front of hers. The man strode out of his car and walked up to hers. Margaret, you can't escape. Finally, with no way out, she set the place ablaze. When he heard that the old house was on fire, Ronald was still in the apartment trying to calm down the sulking Megan. It wasn't until he bought Megan an $80 million necklace that the girl finally beamed with joy. Giving him several kisses, she led him to sit on the sofa. And together they started looking at baby clothes. Upon seeing the incoming call, he pushed Megan away and walked to the balcony. Megan had initially wanted to curiously follow him, but a single glance from him pinned her in place. She had no choice but to angrily punch the plush toy on the sofa, only to see his face turn pale as he grabbed his coat and hurried out the door. Where are you going? Megan threw her arms around him, pretending to be upset. Baby doesn't want Daddy to leave today. It doesn't want you to go. He was extremely impatient, but for the sake of the child being born sooner, he still patiently coaxed her in a gentle voice. I have something urgent to attend to. Didn't you say you liked those earrings from the auction last time? I'll have my assistant bring them to you. Thinking of the exorbitantly priced jewelry that would soon be hers, she finally let go and released the person, because the old mansion had been burned down. Margaret could only be sent to the suburban villa. When Ronald saw her again, he noticed she had several injuries all over her body. The anger that had been building up inside him turned into a sigh at that moment. He carefully carried her back to the bed and personally applied the ointment to her wounds. His movements were light, yet they still made her frown and gasp. He quickly blew on her wound, a flicker of pain in his eyes. Does it still hurt? Margaret didn't answer. Just looked at him quietly. It hurts, but I don't regret it at all, because I started this fire. Ronald looked up, a flicker of pain in his eyes. Do you really want to leave me like this? Yes, I want to leave you, even if it means death. Margaret, hearing her say this, Ronald could no longer control himself, his heartache threatening to overflow. Please don't say that. Hurting you makes me wish I were dead. I don't love her. I really don't love her. Just wait a little longer. I beg you to wait. Everything will go back to how it was before. After saying this, he slammed the door and left, specifically instructing the butler to strengthen the villa's security before departing. For the next 3 months, Ronald never came back. He didn't even send a single message. As if trying to teach her a lesson, Ronald took Megan traveling around the world, letting her upload their intimate photos to Twitter. In the photos, the two were pressed closely together, feeding each other biscuits mouth to mouth, looking exactly like a young couple showing off their affection. At the beach, she lay on his lap in a light swimsuit, touching his abs as if showing off. Under the dim, ambiguous lighting, their legs were entangled, and their eyes were only on each other. For a moment, countless netizens started shipping the couple in the comments section of her posts. Margaret naturally saw these photos as well. If it were before, she would probably have cried all day long, but now, she no longer holds any expectations for Ronald and only wishes to leave as soon as possible, so she simply doesn't care about these things at all. Meanwhile, on the other side, Ronald waited for a long time but didn't see Margaret come to make amends, and his heart was filled with confusion. In the past, whenever intimate photos of him with other women were exposed, even if it was just a normal social engagement, Margaret would be jealous for a long time and appear before him immediately, demanding an explanation. That's why he was so certain that before long, Margaret would come to him with red eyes. But after waiting for several months in a row, there was no sign of her, not even a text message. He could no longer sit still and secretly went back many times. However, on the surveillance footage, he saw her looking completely unfazed, casually playing with the dog. Seemingly indifferent to the widespread rumors about him and Megan, her reaction caught Ronald completely off guard, leaving him heartbroken with no outlet for his frustration. So he could only return home in a huff. Regarding Ronald's unusually doting behavior, Megan didn't overthink it, completely immersing herself in the bliss. After all, in the past, his kindness toward her had always been for the sake of their child, and he never allowed her to flaunt their relationship so openly. Seeing her so favored, those who had previously looked down on her now rushed to curry favor with her. Megan, Mr. Fu dotes on you so much, and with a child by your side, it seems you'll be sitting in the position of Mrs. Fu in no time. Yes, Megan, if you really become Mrs. Fu, don't forget us, your girlfriends. Faced with her girlfriend's flattery, Megan became increasingly arrogant and clung to Ronald even more intensely. It was precisely because of her excessive clinginess that she discovered he would drive to the suburban villa every time she fell asleep. Then he would return in the morning with a sullen face. Although Ronald used to come home before, it was always to the old mansion, not this suburban villa. Driven by curiosity, she finally couldn't help but ask him, "Ronald, what do you do at the suburban villa every day?" Ronald suddenly looked at her coldly. Don't ask questions you shouldn't. In Ronald's eyes, she was merely a tool to carry Margaret's child, and there was no need for her to know so much. But a woman's intuition is sharp. The more he refused to say, Megan, the more suspicious she became. He went to that villa every night, and aside from a woman, she couldn't think of anything else that could attract him. The thought that he might be keeping a woman inside made Megan suddenly burn with rage. If she managed to successfully seduce Ronald, her methods must not be underestimated. Now that she was on the verge of becoming the envied Mrs. Owen, someone actually dared to try and steal her position. They were simply asking for death. She was about to go confront them. But then, as if struck by a thought, she paused mid-step. Ronald, although he doted on her immensely, he had his own boundaries. He forbade her from going to places he didn't permit. Her best friends, however, brushed it off casually. Megan, you're going to be the future Mrs. Owen. What places could possibly be off-limits to you? Megan, successfully persuaded and egged on by her friends, she led a large group of people in a grand procession to the suburban villa. At the suburban villa, Margaret was sleeping when she heard a commotion coming from outside in the distance. Ronald comes here every single day. Today I'm going to find out what exactly is hidden inside this villa. The bodyguard looked at her with a troubled expression. Megan, Mr. Ronald said that no one except him is allowed to enter. What's the big deal? Do you know who our Megan is? How dare you not let her in? Be careful or Mr. Ronald will have your hides when he finds out. What a blind dog, Megan snorted coldly. At the last banquet, someone accidentally scratched her face. And Ronald immediately made that person lose everything they had. This time, a mere bodyguard dared to stop her unless he had a death wish. In the end, after much hesitation, the bodyguard still let them in. As soon as the door opened, a face bearing an 80% resemblance to Megan came into her view. Megan instantly froze in place. Oh my God, Megan, she looks so much like you. What do you mean looks like? If you ask me, she probably had plastic surgery to copy Megan, didn't she? I think so. Megan narrowed her eyes, and before Margaret could even speak, she suddenly slapped her across the face. The unexpected slap left Margaret momentarily stunned. Megan had already rolled up her sleeves. Where did this wretched woman come from, daring to alter her appearance to look like me? Is it because you've seen how favored I've been lately, and you're secretly scheming to try and replace me? I'm telling you, it's never going to happen. Mrs. Owen can only be me. Today I'm going to make you understand the consequences of seducing Ronald. It wasn't until this moment that Margaret realized this was probably the substitute Ronald had found. It seemed Ronald hadn't told her about his own existence, which was why she mistook her for a woman competing for the Mrs. Owen position. Margaret took a deep breath and was about to explain when Megan kicked her behind the knee, causing her to instantly collapse in pain onto the ground. She still wanted to resist. Megan's close friends stepped forward and firmly held her down, making her unable to move. I always wondered why Ronald went out every night. It turns out it was for a cheap woman like you. You knew Ronald is madly in love with me, so you deliberately used my face to catch his attention, didn't you? Margaret found these words utterly ridiculous, but considering that the other woman was also deceived and unaware of the truth, she suppressed her anger and advised her. I suggest you leave quickly, otherwise when Ronald returns, he won't let you off. She tried to persuade her kindly, but who would have thought? Megan burst into laughter upon hearing it. He won't let me off. Ha ha ha, that's hilarious. What do you think you are, daring to make Ronald not let me off? Do you know how much he loves me? Do you know I'm carrying his child? Even if I kill you today, he would only lovingly help me cover it up, instead of worrying about me. You should worry about yourself right now. Margaret felt her heart suddenly tighten under her gaze. What are you going to do? Megan grabbed her hair, scrutinized her up and down with intense focus, then suddenly broke into a smile, one dripping with malice and menace. The work done on this face is truly impressive, almost fooled even me. But soon enough, it won't be yours anymore. As she spoke, she forcefully drove her sharp nails deep into Margaret's cheek. Ah! Margaret felt her flesh being torn apart strand by strand, the pain like a crushing weight that made it hard for her to breathe. She struggled desperately, but pinned down by several people, she could only let the flesh on her face be torn apart bit by Megan's nails, blood streaming down from them. Megan's several close friends immediately swarmed in, raining down punches and kicks on her. The intense pain nearly paralyzed her entire body, watching her curl up in agony. Megan smiled with satisfaction. Margaret finally couldn't help but shout, "You've got the wrong person. I'm not the woman who seduced Ronald, I'm Mrs. Owen, his lawfully wedded wife." Hearing this, her close friends couldn't help but laugh. Megan also withdrew her hand, covered her stomach, and threw her head back with laughter. "You're his wife? Then who am I?" "Yeah, exactly. We never heard that Mr. Ronald got married." Several close friends chimed in agreement. Megan wiped away tears of laughter, looking at her sarcastically. "That's hilarious. If you want to get into Ronald's bed, just say so, spreading rumors like this. Be careful Ronald doesn't skin you alive. And you even claim to be Ronald's wife. Daydreaming in broad daylight, are we?" Margaret struggled to look at the person before her. When they got married, because of her naturally low-key nature, very few people outside their circle knew she was Ronald's Mrs. Owen. Now it had become evidence for others to deny her identity. On top of that, to provoke her, he deliberately took so many intimate photos with Megan, undoubtedly making the outside world believe that Megan was the one Ronald intended to marry in the future. But she never stopped to think, how could a girl from an ordinary family like her, so mismatched with Ronald, be chosen by him out of thousands of people, and even be asked to bear his children? Margaret's hands slowly clenched, and she struggled to get up. "I really am Mrs. Owen. If you don't believe me, call Ronald right now." But Megan stepped on her hand, her high heel grinding heavily into her fingers. "Still pretending? You're still pretending for me. It seems the lesson wasn't enough for you. Someone, go to the kitchen and bring a sharp knife. I want to see how long this bitch can keep her mouth shut." The knife was quickly brought over. Watching Megan grasp that sharp blade, a chill ran down Margaret's spine. "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" She wanted to scream, but only a hoarse gasp escaped her lips. She wanted to flee, but someone held her shoulders down firmly. She was pressed to the ground, desperate and helpless, watching with wide eyes as Megan approached her step by step, knife in hand. "What am I doing?" "Destroying your face, of course. Let's see if you still dare to get plastic surgery to look like me." As the words left her lips, Megan put all her strength into it, drawing the knife heavily across her face. The blade sliced through skin and flesh, deep enough to reveal the bone, and she could no longer hold back her agonized cry. But the next moment, Megan swung the blade toward her once again. 1 cut, 2 cuts, 3 cuts, 18 cuts, 34 cuts, 52 cuts in total. Margaret wailed with each one, yet the group showed not a moment of mercy. She clearly heard the sound of the blade slicing through flesh. She also clearly felt the trail of blood flowing down her cheek. She could still clearly see the ferocious and terrifying smiles on their faces. The air was thick with the smell of blood. Her entire face had already become a bloody mess, and her body involuntarily convulsed. Megan still seemed unsatisfied, and had her best friend go to the kitchen to prepare a bucket of chilly water, then pressed Margaret's entire bloody face into the chilly water. Margaret instantly let out a sharp, piercing scream, a sound like an invisible hand tightly gripping one's heart. Utterly miserable. It hurts so much." But Megan laughed wildly and recklessly, her face showing madness, as she kept taking photos of her with her phone. "Ha ha ha ha, look at you now, you're just like a dog. So disgusting it makes me want to vomit. With the way you look now, your whole face is ruined. Let's see if you still dare to seduce Ronald." Margaret opened her mouth, but couldn't utter a single word. She lay in a pool of blood like a pile of mud, unable to move, her breath faint. A few close girlfriends leaned in closer, only faintly hearing her say, "You will regret this." The group couldn't help but feel a chill. "Megan, isn't this going a bit too far? Mr. Ronald won't get angry, will he?" Megan let out a cold laugh, crossed her arms, and admired the scene with indifference. "What's there to get angry about? Ronald likes me so much. How could he possibly blame me over such a small matter? Besides, I'm carrying his child. It's like having a get-out-of-jail-free card. Have you forgotten how much he cared about me before?" The girlfriends quickly agreed and stopped worrying. Megan kicked Margaret, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, and said, "I'm warning you. Not just anyone can make Ronald fall for them. You'd better give up on trying to climb the social ladder. Since you're so desperate for men, I'll grant you a few." After saying that, Megan called over a few beggars. Looking at the beggars with their yellow teeth and foul odor, Megan smiled with satisfaction and pointed at the woman lying on the ground covered in blood, saying, "She's all yours, though her face is a mess, her body's still good, do whatever you want with her. Just don't kill her." The beggars, who had been wandering for years and hadn't touched a woman in ages, didn't mind Margaret at all. Their mouths watered as they lunged at her. Her skirt was instantly torn to shreds. Their eyes glowed with a green light like hungry wolves as they gazed at her smooth, jade-like body. Several of them scrambled to touch her, incessantly licking her skin with their mouths. Margaret lay powerless on the ground, like a dead fish, unable to struggle. Their hands grew increasingly bold, gradually moving downward. In a daze, she seemed to see that summer again. She had scraped her knee while climbing the wall to pick flowers. It was just a trace of blood, but it made the one whose eyes were always on her turn red with distress. The young man, full of heartache, carefully applied medicine to her wound with a cotton swab, gently blowing on it as he did. "My dear, from now on, don't let yourself get hurt. If you ache, I ache more." Tears streamed from her eyes, tracing paths over the grotesque wounds, mixing with blood, and finally disappearing into the floor. "Ronald, is this the outcome you wanted?" Her clothes were torn to shreds, every inch of her body had been kissed by the beggars, and just as they dropped their pants to enter her, her windpipe kept spasming, making it hard to breathe, and in her despair, she was on the verge of biting her tongue to end her life. At the same moment, the door was violently kicked open. "What are you doing?" Ronald was dressed in casual clothes, holding an exquisite box in his hand, as if he had just come from an auction. Hearing the faint screams coming from inside, a flicker of confusion crossed his eyes, and he started to walk toward the villa. Megan, her eyes lit up, and she stepped forward gracefully, linking her arm with his. "Ronald, what brings you here? I thought you had a business dinner tonight." A trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. But he still gently patted her head and handed her the box in his hand. "Tonight's social engagement has been cancelled. By the way, here's the ring I promised you last time. Take a look and see if you like it." Megan joyfully kissed his cheek before opening the box and putting on the exquisite diamond ring. The diamond sparkled brilliantly in the sunlight. "I love it so much." "Thank you, Ronald." Several of her close girlfriends gathered around to compliment her. "Oh my God. This diamond ring is so beautiful." "Megan, Mr. Ronald is really so good to you." Ronald looked at their teasing with growing impatience, when suddenly he seemed to remember something. He grabbed Megan's hand. "I remember saying that no one is allowed to come in without my permission. Didn't I?" Megan shivered and quickly winked at her best friend beside her. Her best friend played along. "That's right, Mr. Ronald. We didn't mean to come in. We were just playing nearby when we happened to see a woman deliberately disguised as Megan's sis, climbing over the wall to get in. She probably wanted to become the mistress, so she half raised her eyes, cautiously glancing at Ronald, then quickly lowered them again, looking as if she had more to say but held back. The man immediately roared at the bodyguards beside him. "How do you do your jobs? You didn't even know an outsider climbed in. Do you still want to work here or not?" Megan pouted. "Ronald, don't blame them. The villa is so big, it's inevitable they'd overlook things sometimes. I've already taught that plastic surgery woman a lesson for you." Ronald finally let go of her hand, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I thought you were delicate. But I didn't expect you to have such abilities," Megan said proudly. "Of course, anyone who means ill towards Ronald, I will definitely eliminate for you." Her best friend chimed in. "Mr. Ronald, while you were away, Megan's sis, despite being pregnant, was constantly busy for you. Even I was touched by her efforts." Megan stamped her foot shyly. "I told you not to tell Ronald." "Why is Megan's sis shy?" "I'm just telling the truth." Megan grew even shyer, about to hide in his arms. Ronald, however, subtly moved aside and called the butler. "You're pregnant, and staying here too long isn't good for the baby. I'll have the butler take you home first." After saying that, he was about to walk into the villa. "Ronald." Megan let out a frightened cry and suddenly clutched her stomach, her face covered in cold sweat. My stomach hurts so much." Ronald tensed up and quickly supported her by the waist. "Why did it suddenly start hurting?" She shook her head. But her hand tightly gripped his clothes. She seemed to be in extreme discomfort. A few of her close friends also gathered around with concern. "Mr. Ronald, maybe you should take Megan to the hospital first." "Yes, what if something unexpected happens?" Ronald was just about to scoop her up in his arms when a piercing scream suddenly echoed from the villa. "Ronald." The man froze, a flicker of terror flashing in his eyes, without another thought for the person clutching her stomach in pain. He shoved her aside and dashed into the villa. The gruesome scene before him would later become a recurring nightmare that haunted his sleep. The one he held dear in the palm of his hand, the one he never dared to harm in the slightest, was now pinned beneath a group of thugs, being wantonly humiliated. Her clothes were stripped away completely, her body covered in red marks of all kinds. This undoubtedly excited those thugs even more, as they scrambled to their feet, stripped off their clothes, and prepared to pounce on her again, and that face he had kissed countless times was now covered with hideous scars, with blood continuously flowing from the wounds. Those eyes that had once looked at him with so much love were now lifeless. Margaret, a surge of rage erupted within him, and the man charged forward, kicking those thugs away. Get out. He looked at the disheveled woman, his eyes filled with unbearable pain, countless regrets pressing down on him, making it hard to breathe. Almost, it was so close. If he had arrived a moment later, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Ronald carefully took off his jacket, covering her exposed body, then tremblingly held her in his arms. Margaret, his voice was full of tremors, carrying a hint of sobbing. Margaret struggled to open her eyes, her tone filled with mockery and resentment. Ronald, are you satisfied now that I've become like this? The man stiffened, his face full of pain. No, I just wanted you to calm down. I had no idea any of this would happen. You don't know, but you didn't spare me either. If it weren't for your indulgence of Megan, how would she dare treat me like this? Her hands weakly pushed against his chest, trying to break free from his embrace. Ronald, however, held on tightly, refusing to let go, and coaxed her in a hoarse voice. Margaret, be good, don't move, okay, your wound will deepen if you do, listen to me. After saying that, he shouted at the bodyguard without regard for his image. What are you standing there for? Call a doctor. The bodyguard looked at him in astonishment, then glanced at Megan outside the door, who was still clutching her stomach and crying out in pain. Megan spoke in disbelief. Ronald, what's wrong with you? Have you really been fooled by her face? She deliberately approached you. Shouldn't you throw her out immediately? Several girlfriends also chimed in urgently. Yes, Mr. Ronald. We don't know where this person came from, but she suddenly appeared in the villa. She must have ill intentions. You should just throw her out. Keeping someone like this around, who knows how dangerous it could be. When Megan tried to drive her away, she almost got her face injured. Luckily, Megan reacted quickly and told us to hold her down. The more they spoke, the more Ronald's face darkened, and his hands clenched tighter. He slowly turned to look at her, his voice laced with suppressed anger. So you threw the first punch, didn't you? Megan didn't catch the anger in his voice. She thought he was praising her and couldn't help but lift her chin. I was the one who did it, but if it can help Ronald with his worries, I don't mind getting a little hurt. Seeing this, the few close friends nearby also breathed a sigh of relief and rushed to claim credit for her. Yes, that bitch actually dared to hurt Megan's sister, to teach her a lesson. Megan's sister ruined her face, afraid that this bitch might come to pester you again in the future. Megan's sister specially hired a group of thugs to assault her. Megan listened to their words while wearing a smug smile. She felt this was exactly the outcome Ronald wanted to see, and he would surely praise her. Sure enough, Ronald curled the corner of his mouth, but his eyes darkened to near black, seemingly hiding a faintly rising flame within. In that case, it seems I should properly thank you. Megan smiled shyly. Ronald, Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Ronald's cold voice. He instructed the bodyguard beside him. Go, bring a knife. Megan's eyes lit up, thinking that Ronald felt her punishment wasn't enough, so he wanted to make a few more cuts on that bitch's face. Thinking of this, she excitedly urged the bodyguard beside her. Hurry up, Ronald already said. Bring the knife. Ronald wore a cold expression, his demeanor inscrutable. The bodyguard quickly brought over a sharp dagger. Megan pointed at Margaret's face and shouted, quick, slash that bitch's face a few more times. Her eyes gleamed with a frenzied light, her entire face flushed crimson, her attention completely fixed on Margaret. Completely unaware of the bodyguard approaching her from behind, Ronald gave a sinister smile. This knife is prepared for you. Before Megan could react, the bodyguard behind her rushed over and delivered a fierce kick to the back of her knee. He then firmly pinned her hands behind her back, rendering her completely immobile. Another person pinched her face, the dagger in his hand glinting coldly, reflecting Megan's terrified eyes. A sharp, agonizing scream pierced the sky, and countless sprays of blood gushed out, one slash after another, carving bright red roses upon her face. It wasn't until Megan's entire face was a bloody mess, only then did the bodyguard release her. She knelt on the ground in agony, her hands trembling as she touched her face, then violently pulled them away. My face. Her friends, terrified by the scene, collapsed to the ground, shrinking back against the wall. Hearing the noise, Ronald coldly glanced at them, his voice falling on their ears like that of a devil. Take these ones too. Their faces instantly turned deathly pale, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Remembering that Megan had started it all, They immediately shifted all the blame onto her. "Mr. Ronald, you can't blame us for this." "That's right. It was all Megan's terrible idea. We didn't do anything." Hearing them twist the truth, if it were before, Megan would have definitely slapped them hard and cursed them out, but now, she was lying prostrate on the ground in agony, barely clinging to life. Ronald, his eyes turned cold, and the bodyguards immediately stepped forward to restrain those few people. After dozens of vicious stabs, another wave of agonizing screams rose and fell. The entire villa was instantly filled with the overwhelming smell of blood, making people unable to stop vomiting. Seeing the doctor arrive, he carefully handed the unconscious Margaret into the doctor's arms, letting him take her to the room for treatment. Only after doing all this did he free his hands and walk step by step towards Megan, crouching in front of her. "Why?" Hearing this, Ronald let out a cold laugh. "Why? Who told you to touch my wife?" Megan's eyes widened instantly, and her words began to stammer. "Why your wife? He's married. That woman really is his wife." A fear spread through her heart, and she couldn't stop herself from backing away, but he grabbed her by the neck. "I thought you were obedient, yet you dare to touch my people. Megan, how many lives do you have to dare do this?" The woman trembled even more, tears streaming down her face uncontrollably. Ronald, shut up." The man's grip tightened, as if he intended to choke her to death. Megan immediately gasped for air, and the pain in her stomach intensified. She looked at him with a tear-streaked face, pleading, "Please, Mr. Ronald, please spare my life for the sake of our child." It would have been better if she hadn't mentioned the child. The moment she did, Ronald's face grew even darker. "Our child? When did I ever say that was our child?" The woman's face went pale, and her body stiffened. What do you mean?" When Ronald first approached her, to avoid trouble, he simply told her to bear him a child. He said nothing else. She was so overwhelmed by the sudden wealth that she didn't think much of it at the time. She just thought that with this child, she could elevate her status through her son and marry into a wealthy family. But now, hearing his words, she had an ominous premonition. Sure enough, the man leaned close to her ear and whispered, word by word, "This child is mine and Margaret's. You are nothing but a tool." With a buzz, Megan's mind went completely blank. The man grabbed her face again, his eyes growing even more mocking. "Do you know why I chose only you back then? Because your face resembles Margaret's so much. Any child born would surely look like her too, a mere stand-in, still dreaming of climbing up. What wishful thinking." One blow after another left Megan completely collapsed on the ground. Her dream of marrying into a wealthy family was shattered by his own hands at this very moment. Watching her laugh hysterically, Ronald paid no attention at all. Just then, the doctor rushed out from inside. "Mr. Ronald, Mrs. Owen's vital signs are critical. She needs to be sent to the hospital immediately." Upon hearing this, Ronald immediately kicked Megan away, rushed back into the room, and carried out the unconscious person. Megan was kicked so hard that she began bleeding heavily from below. Realizing what was happening, she screamed in horror, my child, the hospital." Watching Margaret being wheeled into surgery, Ronald slumped dejectedly against the wall. His eyes were fixed intently on the operating room door. A bodyguard nearby cautiously spoke up, "Mr. Ronald, MS. Megan is refusing to have the surgery, saying she won't proceed unless you go and stay with her." Ronald let out a cold laugh, making the nearby bodyguard tremble involuntarily. "Since she doesn't want to do it, tie her to the operating table for me. No anesthesia allowed. Directly perform a C-section to take the child." How could he let her off so easily when she dared to hurt Margaret like that? "By the way, what about those thugs? As per your instructions, Mr. Ronald, we've broken their limbs, cut out their tongues, and thrown them into the sewage pool. Don't let them die. These are Megan's future husbands to serve for the rest of her life." He gave the bodyguards a long list of instructions before finally letting them leave. Just as he was about to lean back against the wall again, a sharp gust of wind flashed by. A punch sent him sprawling to the ground, and the assailant sat on top of him, throwing one punch after another fiercely at his face. "Ronald, is this how you treat my sister?" Morgan's eyes were bloodshot. The Moore couple followed behind, their faces equally filled with rage. Only when his face was swollen from the beating and blood kept flowing from the corner of his mouth did Morgan finally get up from him, delivering another fierce kick. Then he picked him up again and slammed him hard against the wall several times. Ronald spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground in a wretched state. "Mom, Dad, brother, this matter is my fault. I will apologize to Margaret. Do not call us Mom and Dad. We don't have a son-in-law like you." Mrs. Moore was filled with rage. 3 months ago, her daughter had called her in tears, saying that Ronald had cheated on her and even had a child with someone else. Her heart ached for her daughter, and she urged her to get a divorce immediately, but to this day, she still hadn't seen the divorce papers from her daughter. I couldn't get through to my daughter on the phone. While sending people to investigate, they immediately took a flight back from the United States overnight. It wasn't until they were in the car that they learned about the tragic experiences their daughter had endured over the past 3 months. Mr. Moore recalled the miserable appearance of his daughter in the photo, and a surge of anger rose in his chest again. He kicked him to the ground with a single blow. "You bastard. Margaret has been held in the palm of our hands since she was a child and has never suffered the slightest grievance. Only because we've known each other for so many years and understand each other inside and out did I dare entrust her to you, and this is how you take care of her." After saying that, still feeling unsatisfied, he gave another hard kick. Mrs. Moore was also filled with anger and disappointment in her eyes. At first, she thought Ronald had a good temperament and believed her daughter would have a good life married to him. But it ended up like this. "Ronald, if you don't like our daughter, you can just say it outright. Why do you claim to love her while sleeping with another woman? And in the end, you even allowed that woman to disfigure our daughter's face." Ronald was filled with bitterness, opening his mouth but not knowing how to explain. This appearance made Morgan burn with rage again. He lifted his foot, ready to deliver a fierce kick. A sharp voice rang out from the end of the corridor. "Don't you dare touch my son." Ronald's mom rushed over and stood in front of Ronald, glaring at them furiously. "How dare you hit my son?" Mrs. Moore saw her, and fury reignited in her eyes. She remembered her daughter texting her in tears, sobbing about Ronald's mom's exploitation. She slapped her. "I'm not just going to hit your son, I'm going to hit you too." With that, she slapped her again. "Mom!" Ronald's mom screamed and jumped to her feet, raising her hand to strike back, but she was Mrs. Moore firmly restrained by both hands. "Madam, this is the fine son you've raised. Not only did he cheat, but he even let his mistress ruin my daughter's face." Spit. Ronald's mom hocked a mouthful of saliva viciously and snarled. "It's your daughter's fault for being infertile. Should my son be forbidden from seeking someone else? Serves you right. Shut up." While Mrs. Moore was dealing with Ronald's mom, Mr. Moore cast a cold glance at Ronald on the ground. "I'll have the lawyer bring the divorce papers over shortly. From now on, you and our Margaret will have nothing to do with each other." Like a heavy blow, Ronald trembled all over. He scrambled up from the ground in a panic and grabbed onto Mr. Moore's pant leg. "No, please, I don't want a divorce." He kept repeating this sentence, praying that Mr. Moore would take these words back. He couldn't imagine what he would do for the rest of his life without Margaret. Morgan kicked him away, his tone full of sarcasm. "No divorce. Could it be that my sister has to raise the child of a mistress?" Mentioning the child, Ronald seemed to think of something, his eyes suddenly lighting up. "Yes, they still have a child, that's right. We can't get divorced. If we do, what will happen to the child?" Mr. Moore sneered coldly. For the first time, he felt that the person before him was so foolish. Beside him, Mrs. Moore was about to speak when Ronald's mom, who had also heard the word divorce, rushed over and quickly said, "Divorce? It must be a divorce. A hen that doesn't lay eggs. Our family doesn't want that. Besides, our family is about to have a grandson soon. When the time comes, I'll have my son marry the child's mother." "Mom!" Ronald immediately stopped Ronald's mom. "Don't say any more. I only want Margaret to be my wife." Ronald's mom clutched her chest, looking at him with an expression of frustration and disappointment. You. Before he could finish his words, he collapsed to the ground and didn't get up. "Mom!" The scene instantly descended into chaos. At that moment, Margaret, who had just finished her surgery, was wheeled out. The Moore family of 3 no longer paid any attention to the Owen family mother and son. They followed the hospital bed to the VIP ward. In the ward, looking at her daughter, whose entire face was wrapped in bandages, Mrs. Moore couldn't stop her tears from flowing. Her daughter, once so radiant, was now a pitiful sight. Beside her, Mr. Moore patted her shoulder reassuringly but said nothing. 3 days later, the person in the hospital bed stirred slightly, slowly opening her eyes. "Water." Mrs. Moore looked at her with delight, quickly raised the hospital bed halfway, inserted a straw into the cup, and carefully handed it to her. "Here, drink slowly." After finishing a glass of water, Margaret looked at her parents in front of her. Seeing their concerned expressions, a wave of grievance welled up in her heart. "Dad." "Mom, hey, you absolutely must not cry. You just had surgery on your face. You can't cry." Mrs. Moore quickly stopped her. Margaret touched her face, which was wrapped in bandages, a flash of pain and bitterness in her eyes. She would never forget Megan's vicious expression when she slashed her face with a knife, a total of 99 cuts. The pain was so unbearable she wished for death. She could never forget the one who caused all this tragedy. Thinking of this, she asked her parents, "Where are they, Mrs.?" Moore knew exactly who she was asking about, but the moment she remembered what Ronald and Megan had done to her daughter, Mrs. Moore felt the anger that had barely subsided flare up again, yet she still patiently told her daughter, "The mistress gave birth to a son. Since it was a C-section without anesthesia, she hasn't woken up yet." As for Ronald, he's still kneeling outside the door. After saying this, Mrs. Moore took a piece of paper out of the drawer and handed it to her. "This is the divorce agreement your brother had printed yesterday. Take a look and see if there are any issues. If not, just sign it." Margaret took the divorce agreement, her heart filled with mixed emotions. Suddenly, she remembered the day she and Ronald had registered their marriage. The sunlight had been exceptionally bright that day. As they stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, sunlight poured over the two of them. He spun her around in his arms again and again, finally planting a tender kiss on her forehead. "From now on, you're my wife." She remembered the sheer joy in his eyes all these years. The scene continued to unfold, and suddenly she saw again the day she exposed his affair. Such a proud man, yet he clung desperately to her waist, begging her to take back her words about divorce. "You are my wife, and I will never let you leave, even if I die." In the end, all that remained in her memory were fragmented and chaotic recollections. 12 years of childhood sweethearts, 5 years of marriage, yet it ended in such a bleak and dismal way. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eye and looked out the window. The sky today was unusually gloomy, like a prelude to a downpour, so oppressive it felt hard to breathe. She felt exceptionally relieved, because from today onwards, she would finally be free, without reading the terms and conditions in the agreement. She flipped directly to the last page and signed her name decisively, Margaret. The tightly shut door finally opened again, and Ronald, who had been crouching against the wall, quickly scrambled to his feet. He had become completely weak from not eating or drinking for several days. Staggering several steps, he finally steadied himself by leaning against the wall and looked toward the person emerging from inside. Mr. Moore gazed at him calmly, as if looking at an unrelated stranger. Ronald's heart inexplicably skipped several beats in succession. Looking at Mr. Moore as he handed over the paper, he seemed to have a premonition of something and took several steps back. "No, I won't sign. Dad, Uncle, I beg you, give me one more chance. I can't leave Margaret." He fell to his knees with a thud, kowtowing incessantly, as if hoping to gain Mr. Moore's pity this way. But Mr. Moore was completely unmoved, and directly instructed the bodyguard beside him, "Drag him far away and beat him until he signs." After speaking, Mr. Moore threw the divorce agreement in his hand in front of him, turned around, and closed the door again. The wailing outside the door gradually faded away, and only after making sure no sound could be heard at all, Mr. Moore nodded at the mother and son. Mrs. Moore finally let out a sigh of relief and touched her daughter's face. "We're returning to the United States today. The cosmetic surgeon has already been scheduled. We'll go directly after getting off the plane. As for matters here at home, your brother will take care of the rest. Margaret, is there anything else you need to bring?" Margaret shook her head. Those things would only remind her of the painful past. Only by completely letting go could she forget the past and start living anew. The plane streaked across the sky and finally disappeared from sight. Meanwhile, in another VIP room at the hospital, the man lay there, his face covered in wounds. After an unknown amount of time, he finally opened his eyes. "Margaret." But there was no one to answer in the empty room. He then remembered that he had been beaten unconscious by Mr. Moore's bodyguards for refusing to sign the divorce papers. He quickly sat up from the bed, but accidentally knocked something over. He looked down, and his body instantly stiffened. With trembling hands, he bent down to pick it up. And the 3 bold characters "divorce certificate" abruptly entered his sight. Divorce certificate. Ronald quickly flipped open the certificate and saw his single photo firmly printed on it. He got divorced. He and Margaret got divorced. How could that be? Didn't he refuse to agree? Ronald yanked out his leaped out of bed, and rushed toward Margaret's hospital room, only to find it completely empty. He grabbed a passing nurse, his eyes bloodshot, and demanded, "Where is the patient who was in this room?" The nurse had an impatient expression at first, but upon noticing the man was wearing VIP ward attire, she calmly spoke up, "Sir, the patient in this room was discharged yesterday." "Discharged? Did she go home then?" Thinking of this, he went down to the underground parking garage again, hurriedly drove straight to the Moore residence, but as soon as he got out of the car, he was stopped by bodyguards at the gate. "Mr. Ronald, you are not welcome here." Ronald, however, ignored him, intent only on rushing in to find Margaret. "Ronald, it seems you still haven't had enough of a beating. A cold voice sounded from behind him. It was Morgan, who had just returned from the company. Morgan walked up to him and delivered another heavy punch. "Get out. You are not welcome here." Ronald casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, staring at him intently. "Margaret, where have you taken her?" Morgan walked into the villa and coldly tossed out a sentence before the door closed. "You're already divorced. You have no right to ask about her whereabouts." Boom, thunder rumbled, and rain poured down in torrents. Ronald hadn't fully recovered from his injuries, and after getting drenched in the heavy rain, he collapsed again after just a few steps. When he woke up, Ronald's mom was looking at him with a mix of heartache and reproach. "Finally, I gave him a hard slap on his uninjured spot. Why are you still going to see that bitch? You're all divorced." "Mom," Ronald frowned. "Margaret is my wife. Don't talk about her like that." Ronald's mom grew increasingly dissatisfied and began to scream. "Why can't I say that about her? A wretched woman, not only can't bear children, but her mother actually dared to hit me. The whole family is no good." Mentioning the child, Ronald's mom's face instantly shifted 180 degrees again, beaming with joy. "Speaking of which, it's been so long since the child was born, and you still haven't seen them. That child's smile looks exactly like yours when you were little. The baby was born not long ago. Its features haven't even fully formed yet. Who could tell who it resembles?" However, Ronald's mom had been longing for a grandchild for so long. She was naturally overjoyed, thinking everything about the child was perfect. Last time a relative made some careless remarks, saying the child didn't look like it belonged to their own family, and Ronald's mom directly cursed them out until they cut off all relations. Ronald's mom was still chattering on about something. But he didn't hear a word of it. He just stared blankly at the divorce certificate in his hand. His 12-year friendship and 5-year romance with Margaret had come to a complete end, but in his heart, he was utterly unwilling to accept it. He loved Margaret so much. How could he let go so easily? Thinking of this, he casually sent Ronald's mom away. Ronald's mom had only gone halfway when she suddenly thought of something again. She came back to remind him, "If you have time, you should go see the child's mother. After all, she gave birth to a son." Seeing him nod, Ronald's mom finally closed the door. He immediately took out his phone and dialed Margaret's number. Only then did he realize his phone was turned off. This was within his expectations. So after hanging up, he dialed another number. "Help me check on Madam's whereabouts." But the person on the other end of the line didn't immediately agree, only speaking with great difficulty. "Mr. Ronald, this might be impossible to find out." Ronald frowned. "What do you mean?" The person on the other end swallowed hard. "I heard it was the Moore family who blocked the news, forbidding anyone from inquiring about the Moore family eldest daughter. So, enough. I don't care what method you use, investigate for me, or you're fired." The call abruptly ended as he violently threw the phone to the ground. Suddenly remembering something, he picked up the phone again and walked out the door. In a certain ward of the obstetrics and gynecology department, a woman with a ferocious expression was violently smashing the surrounding items, screaming incessantly, get out, all of you." The nurse nearby didn't indulge her either and started cursing directly. "You're the one who needs to leave. You've been hospitalized for so long, and you still haven't paid your hospital bills. I've never seen anyone as shameless as you." Another scream. Megan threw the cup at the nurse. "Get out, you lunatic." The nurse cursed under her breath as she pushed the door open, only to nearly bump into the tall man standing outside. "Mr. Ronald." The man nodded, stepped around her, and closed the door. The room was in complete disarray. The woman on the bed was breathing heavily with a vicious glare, making her face appear even more repulsive. When she saw Ronald, she didn't even bother pretending. "What are you doing here? Get out." Ronald ignored her, stepping closer step by step, then suddenly lifted her face with his hand. He clicked his tongue and said, "So ugly." Megan slapped at him, but he caught her wrist and pushed her back using the momentum. Her entire body slammed hard against the wall. Looks like the last lesson wasn't enough. Recalling the 100 cuts across her face, her eyes filled with terror. What are you going to do?" Ronald approached her and patted her face. "Don't be afraid." The next second, he dragged her to the ground and pulled her out of the ward as if mopping the floor. All the way, she screamed in agony, the freshly healed knife scar on her face bleeding again from friction with the floor, but no one came to save her. At that moment, Ronald's mom, holding her grandson, suddenly came face to face with them. Upon seeing this scene, she immediately let out a scream. She quickly had the bodyguard nearby rescue Megan, then slapped him hard across the face. "Are you crazy? She is the mother of your child." Ronald had his head knocked to the side, and he pressed his tongue against the left side of his face where he had been struck. Only then did he look at the mother before him. "What kind of mother is she, Mom? Don't forget, We agreed from the start that all we needed was to have the baby born. As for how to deal with the person, you said you wouldn't interfere." Looking at Megan, who had been brought back to the hospital room, then glancing at the grandson in her arms, Ronald's mom felt a flicker of compassion. "Let's consider it accumulating virtue for the child's sake. We'll just drive her away after she recovers." Ronald seemed to have thought of something, a flicker of ruthlessness flashing in his eyes before it finally settled into calm. Fine. Over the next few months, Megan was living quite prosperously. Because Ronald's mom had put in a word at the hospital, the staff treated her with extra respect. On top of that, without Ronald posing a threat, she felt increasingly at ease. On the day of discharge, she had visibly gained some weight. Although she didn't get custody of the child, Ronald's mom gave her a huge check. It was enough for her to live on for the rest of her life. Megan was about to take a taxi and leave. The back of her head suddenly throbbed with pain, her vision went black, and she completely lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Ronald sitting on the sofa in front of her. Megan quickly scrambled up from the floor and kept backing away. "Ronald, what are you going to do? I've already borne your child. There should be nothing between us now," Ronald sneered, picked up the cup in his hand, and walked towards her step by step. "Nothing between us? How could there be nothing between us? You went behind my back, ruined Margaret's face, and almost had her gang raped. We haven't settled that score yet." The woman's eyes widened in terror, her body trembling uncontrollably, but it was as if he had thought of something. He suddenly stood up and looked at him. "What debt are you talking about? I'm telling you, if it weren't for you indulging me, how could I ever find an opportunity to harm her?" The more she spoke, the more confident she became, unable to hold back a cold laugh. "Speaking of which, we are accomplices. You only focus on my sins, but are you without fault yourself?" Ronald, his eyes flashed with pain as he said self-deprecatingly, "I am at fault, and I will atone to her, but before that, I will drag you down to hell first." Megan seemed to sense something and turned to flee outside. "Stop her!" Countless bodyguards swarmed down, pinning her firmly to the ground. The woman finally lost all her arrogance, her eyes filled with terror. "No, no, Ronald, you can't do this to me, I beg you. For the sake of the child I've given you, let me go." The more she spoke, the more panicked she became, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. Ronald crouched before her, pinching her chin. His eyes filled with venom. "Child, where have you ever given birth? That was with Margaret. You're not worthy of bearing my child." Megan shook her head in terror, only to have him force a cup of water down her throat the next second. After the restraints were loosened, she knelt on the ground, unable to stop herself from gagging, trying to force out the water she had drunk. "Don't waste your effort. Even a single drop of this water is effective." The man sat back down on the sofa. Watching her with leisurely composure, the woman's face instantly turned pale. She wanted to rush over, but the effects of the drug began to take hold. Her entire body became unbearably hot, and she couldn't stop moaning from her throat. Now, without even asking, she knew she had been drugged with an aphrodisiac. Watching her transform into such a delicate and alluring state, he curled his lips in satisfaction and clapped his hands. Soon, more than a dozen disheveled and filthy men were brought forward. These people are all her acquaintances. Besides her so-called best friends, there were also the thugs she had hired to assault Margaret. What are you going to do?" Ronald crossed his legs and looked at her. "Aren't you fond of finding men? I'll let you have enough of them in one go." The next second, those who had also been drugged with potent aphrodisiacs lunged at her. The entire room instantly descended into debauchery. A bolt of lightning suddenly struck, illuminating her deathly pale face. Ronald walked leisurely towards the main gate. The moment the door opened, a fierce wind carrying torrential rain lashed against him, yet he unhurriedly opened his black umbrella. But as she descended the steps, she suddenly turned back and instructed the bodyguard beside her, "Remember to film it." The black Maybach sped through the heavy rain. Ronald tapped his fingers while on the phone. "Have you found anyone?" Every answer was no. His heart grew heavier along with the weather outside. He abruptly hung up the phone, closed his eyes, and pondered for a long while. He then opened his eyes again and redialed the number. The person on the other end of the line let out a long sigh. "Mr. Ronald, you should just give up. The Moore family's influence is far greater than our own families. If they truly want to hide someone, you won't be able to find them no matter if you search the heavens or dive into the seas. Get lost. I'd rather die than give up on finding her." His expression grew increasingly fierce. Suddenly, he looked up and glared at the driver in front of him. "Turn around, head to the Moore residence." In the pouring rain, a figure stood motionless, staring intently at the gate before them. In the study, Morgan finished the last document, then stretched his aching neck and looked at the butler beside him. "Is he still outside?" The butler quickly nodded. he sneered coldly, then let him keep waiting. No one is allowed to open the door, turning his gaze. He noticed the newly arrived documents on the table. It seems he's been too idle lately. Go find something for him to do. Understood, young master. The butler closed the door and left. In the stairwell, the newly hired servant looked at the person standing outside in the rain and felt a pang of pity. Such heavy rain, won't they catch a cold? The old servant beside her rolled her eyes. Why do you feel sorry for such a scumbag? He cheated on his wife, had a child with his mistress, imprisoned his wife, and even allowed his mistress to bully her. The old servant listed out Ronald's crimes one by one, her eyes growing more and more disgusted. The new servant immediately put away her pity after hearing this and spat at the figure outside the window. Let him drown to death. The butler passed by them and scolded. What are you all gathered here discussing? The two hurriedly left. The main door swung open with a crash, and the person inside slowly walked toward the figure, holding an umbrella. Ronald's eyes, beneath his wet hair, instantly brightened. But as soon as the butler spoke, his gaze immediately dimmed again. Mr. Ronald, you should just give up. No one in the Moore family wants to see you, let alone reveal the eldest young lady's whereabouts. The young master said if you're too idle, you can come back to the company and take a look. Ronald narrowed his eyes and was about to speak when a shrill ringtone erupted from his pocket. The butler no longer looked at him. Turning around to close the door, he stood there in a daze for a long time before finally taking out his phone from his pocket. The moment he answered the call, from over there came Ronald's mom's sharp cursing. You bitch, I'll beat you to death, followed by the sound of various porcelain shattering, even mixed with a few angry shouts from Ronald's dad and the miserable screams of other women. Amid the chaos, someone picked up the phone and urgently said, Mr. Ronald, something has happened at the company. Ronald, ignoring his drenched clothes, immediately told the driver to head to Owen's house. As soon as he stepped out of the CEO's elevator, he saw a crowd gathered outside the CEO's office. What are you doing? The moment they saw him, everyone quickly scattered in all directions. The door was ajar, and the sounds of hitting and cursing continued inside. Ronald, as soon as he pushed the door open, a teacup flew past his forehead and smashed on the floor, shattering into pieces. He looked up and saw Ronald's mom glaring fiercely at the two people opposite her. Spewing a stream of curses from her mouth, across from her, Ronald's dad remained expressionless, carefully shielding the mistress behind him. On the way here, his assistant had already briefed him on the general situation. It turned out that Ronald's dad disliked Ronald's mom for being old and losing her looks, and on top of that, Ronald hadn't had a child for a long time, so he secretly hooked up with Ronald's office secretary. After a fiery affair, the secretary quickly became pregnant. Just when Ronald's mom went to the hospital to take care of her grandson, she happened to see Ronald's dad accompanying his secretary out of the prenatal checkup room. Ronald's mom thought she was seeing things, so she secretly followed them all the way. Finally, Ronald's dad, with his arm around the secretary, walked into Owen's house. Ronald's mom then went crazy, entering the office and tearing into the two of them with biting and hitting. Watching his son enter, Ronald's dad could no longer maintain his composure. He shoved Ronald's mom away. What's all this racket? Ronald's mom staggered from the push. Luckily, Ronald was quick to react and caught his mother. Ronald's mom suddenly widened her eyes and made to step forward again. How dare you push me, Ronald? I've been married into your family for so many years, always being a good wife and mother, never doing anything wrong, and you actually dare to cheat on me. Ronald was still reeling from the fact that his father had cheated, and for a moment, he didn't stop Ronald's mom. The three of them became entangled once again. In the chaos, the mistress was Ronald's mom suddenly pushed to the ground. Immediately, a pool of crimson spread beneath her. The mistress's face turned deathly pale as she let out a scream. My child. Ronald's dad froze for a moment, then his eyes blazed with fury as he violently raised his hand and slapped Ronald's mom. Bitch. This time, Ronald's mom was brutally shoved to the ground, unable to get back up. Meanwhile, Ronald's dad simply picked up his mistress and slammed the door shut as they left. The entire room was left with only the sound of Ronald's mom's sobbing and Ronald's silence. After an unknown amount of time had passed, Ronald helped Ronald's mom up from the ground. Mom, Ronald's mom slapped him hard on the back. Stop calling me like I'm dead. The most urgent matter now is to rush to the hospital. That fool of a father of yours is planning to give 15% of the company's shares to that bitch's child. Ronald suddenly looked up at Ronald's mom. What did you say? Ronald's mom said through gritted teeth. Go to the hospital now, find a few people to kill that bitch's child, or your position as CEO will be gone. Ronald ignored everything else and turned back to rush to the hospital. As soon as he arrived at the ward, he saw Ronald's dad frantically smoking in the smoking area. Recalling Ronald's mom's fierce push just now, Ronald's dad felt increasingly agitated. I turned around to go back to the company and settle the score with Ronald's mom, but ended up bumping right into Ronald, who had just arrived. Looking at his father before him, Ronald was filled with mixed emotions. In his memory, Ronald's dad was still the good father who would come home every day to play with him. He is also a good husband who brings a flower home to Ronald's mom every day. When did it become like this? Ronald was filled with agony, the bitterness in his throat uncontrollable. Dad, why? Ronald's dad was so anxious to return to the company and confront Ronald's mom that he naturally had no patience to accompany him. What else could it be? I'm short on sons. Is that not allowed? But aren't I your son? Ronald's dad sneered coldly. One can never have too many sons. Besides, didn't you also find a mistress and have a child? If you don't care, why should I? Thinking of that child, Ronald frowned. That's because Margaret couldn't conceive, so I had a child with a mistress. Now that I've taken care of the mistress, that child can be considered as mine and Margaret's. Ronald's dad didn't listen to his explanation at all. Just patted him on the shoulder. Don't make excuses for yourself. Cheating is cheating. There's nothing to explain. You're going to have a little brother soon. With that, she turned and left without another glance, leaving him stumbling to sit on the chair alone. Countless thoughts surged through his mind, and for some reason, he suddenly remembered what he had said to Margaret when he was cheating. At the time, he truly couldn't understand why Margaret had reacted so strongly. He merely had someone else bear a child for him, and once the child was born, he would hand it over to Margaret to raise. As for the child's biological mother, she could simply be dismissed. At that time, Margaret was utterly heartbroken and resolutely decided to divorce him. He was still desperately trying to hold on, yet he showed no awareness of his own mistakes. Now, Ronald's dad's words made him completely empathize with Margaret, sharing the same feelings as her. Being betrayed by the one closest to you is truly this painful. Back then, he was just like Ronald's dad is now. He clearly loved his wife deeply before all this. Yet, for the sake of having a son, he resolutely chose to cheat. It was clearly his own fault. Yet he felt no guilt and instead blamed his wife for not understanding him. Tears of remorse streamed from his eyes as he covered his face and wept silently. After what felt like an eternity, he finally stood up and walked toward the mistress's hospital room, but he was stopped by the bodyguards outside the door. Mr. Ronald, you cannot enter without the chairman's permission. Get out. The two bodyguards exchanged a glance and finally gave in. In the hospital bed, the mistress looked at him with a face full of terror. She had heard about Ronald dealing with Megan, and the thought of going through the same nightmare herself made her shudder. She immediately scrambled off the bed and onto the floor, kowtowing repeatedly with a thudding sound. She wished Ronald would let her off, but Ronald still had the nurses hold her down firmly, dragging her toward the operating table. The mistress could no longer maintain her composure, cursing at him like a madwoman. Ronald, you bastard men, you're the ones who couldn't control yourselves and cheated, so why should we women bear the consequences? Why don't you just die? You still want Margaret to forgive you, Pa. In your dreams. Ronald didn't even furrow his brows, just said calmly, I'm naturally at fault too. I'll beg Margaret for forgiveness. As for you, don't think I don't know you're the one who drugged my father's wine. The woman's face instantly turned deathly pale. Don't worry. My father will naturally come to keep you company too. He was about to leave when his assistant came running over, sweating profusely. Mr. Ronald. The shareholders have withdrawn their investments. It turned out that after Ronald's dad returned to the company, he immediately got into a physical fight with Ronald's mom again. At that moment, several clients and shareholders happened to come to the company, and as soon as they opened the door, they witnessed this disgraceful scene. To make matters worse, one major shareholder was even injured by the commotion and had to be hospitalized. After all these maneuvers, the clients simply shook their heads and walked away, while several shareholders were furious and immediately announced their intention to withdraw their investments. The company instantly descended into chaos. Due to the shareholders' withdrawal of funds and the departure of clients, the company faced a shortage of capital, making it impossible to deliver materials to the construction site on time, ultimately leading to the project being abandoned. After the client refused to pay the final installment, the workers began to protest one after another, even gathering on the rooftop to make their demands. For a moment, Ronald was overwhelmed and extremely busy. Looking at the Owen family's series of messy affairs, Morgan took a satisfied sip of tea. Now he wouldn't have time to harass his sister anymore. In order to win back these clients and shareholders, Ronald had to swallow his pride and go around pleading for favors while making concessions. Only then did a few of them relent, agreeing to attend his banquet. At the dining table, a client theatrically lined up an entire table of strong liquor, smiling with insincere eyes as he looked at him. "Mr. Ronald, if you can finish all the liquor on this table, I'll consider resuming the material supply." Ronald looked at the table full of strong liquor and felt a tremor in his heart. He hadn't drunk this much in a long time, back when the company had just gone public. He spent his days socializing, which not only left him reeking of alcohol but also caused stomach problems. Margaret was heartbroken and often accompanied him to these social events to help share the burden. But now, the one who used to drink with him is long gone. He closed his eyes, picked up a bottle, and downed it in one go. Soon, he tossed the empty bottle aside and picked up another one. The client beside him couldn't help but clap his hands. "Mr. Ronald, you're so straightforward." In the end, Ronald couldn't drink anymore and had to run to the bathroom to force himself to vomit. After throwing up, he slumped onto the floor, his face flushed and his vision blurry. Suddenly, he remembered a day from long ago. He had been sitting on the ground in such a wretched state back then as well. The next moment, Margaret pushed the door open and entered, wiping the vomit off him while also feeding him sobering soup, to make him more comfortable. Her eyes were full of heartache at that time. He vaguely raised his hand, wanting to caress her face, but the moment he touched it, the person before him instantly dissipated like smoke and clouds, leaving nothing behind. Only then did he realize that all of this had been his own illusion. Someone was banging loudly on the door outside, and the anxious voice of his assistant could be heard from the other side. "Mr. Ronald, Mr. Ronald, are you alright? If you don't come out soon." They said they're leaving. Thinking of those clients, Ronald struggled to get up from the floor, coming right away, staggering and leaning against the wall as he headed toward the private room. His blurred vision caused him to bump right into someone approaching. The other person was also hot-tempered and immediately cursed with a few foul words. "Are you fucking blind? Do you know who the hell I am? How dare you bump into me? You're fucking asking for it." Alcohol gives one courage, and what's more, Ronald wasn't thinking clearly at all right now. He immediately threw a punch. "Get lost." The other guy wasn't a pushover either. Promptly gesturing to the people behind him, a group of people started brawling. In the end, they all ended up at the police station together. "Mr. Ronald, you can leave if you want, but you'll need to call someone to bail you out and sign the paperwork." Faced with Ronald's shouting, the police officer across from him looked completely unfazed, as if it were a common occurrence. Ronald remembered the unfinished business dinner and plopped back down into the chair. Pulling out his phone in frustration, he dialed a number and said, "Margaret, I'm at the police station. Can you come pick me up?" But there was only a mechanical female voice on the other end. "Sorry, the number you have dialed cannot be reached." Only then did he remember that he had long been Margaret's blocked contact. Left with no other choice, he had to call someone else. Because of the things he had done, those so-called friends had long been avoiding him, and the brothers who had vowed to stand by him through thick and thin quickly distanced themselves from him under the warnings of their elders. As for his parents, they had long been hospitalized together due to a beating. For a time, he was isolated and helpless. He could only sit through the night on the cold iron chair. It wasn't until the next morning that his assistant, who had cleaned up his mess, hurriedly arrived to bail him out. Exhausted, he lay in the back seat, pinched the bridge of his nose, and instructed his assistant to reschedule meetings with those clients to apologize to them. However, the assistant not only didn't agree immediately but remained completely silent. Noticing the assistant's unusual behavior, Ronald sat up straight. "What's wrong?" The assistant spoke with a trembling voice. "Mr. Ronald, the company has gone bankrupt." Ronald's face suddenly changed color. "Say that again. What happened to the company?" The assistant cautiously glanced back at him. "The C company has gone bankrupt." He grabbed the assistant by the collar and swore for the first time in his life. "What the hell are you talking about?" The assistant tremblingly handed the phone to him. He snatched the phone and quickly scanned the content on the screen. Last time, after he sent Ronald's dad's mistress to get an abortion, she held a grudge. She directly filed a real name report accusing Ronald's dad, the chairman, of embezzling public funds. The task force immediately dispatched specialists to the company for investigation. It was discovered that Ronald's dad had lost tens of billions due to gambling, embezzling up to $7.3 billion from the group's funds. This directly led to the company's bankruptcy and collapse due to lack of cash flow and inability to make payments. Because Ronald's dad embezzled an enormous amount of public funds without repayment, he faces a sentence of 10 years or more, or life imprisonment. After confirming everything was correct, they took Ronald's dad away from the hospital overnight. Reading through the entire notice made Ronald see black spots before his eyes again and again. After finally making it to the company, he discovered the entrance was already surrounded by employees and workers demanding their wages. Crowd after crowd, left with no other choice, he could only sneak in through the back door. The entire company was in chaos. As soon as I finally reached my office, I saw Ronald's mom rushing out from inside. She hugged him, tears and snot streaming down her face, crying about what they should do in the future. Ronald was completely preoccupied with the company's bankruptcy and had no time to deal with Ronald's mom. Just let the assistant take her away. He sat back in his chair, listening to the noise downstairs, his eyes filled with confusion. In the end, he had borrowed from everyone in his circle, trying to get some money to cushion the blow, but the Owen family's corporation is now a bottomless pit. Any money thrown into it yields no return. For this reason, they all refused, until nightfall. He hadn't managed to borrow a single cent. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the endless stream of traffic on the street, and for a moment thought about jumping down just like that. But the thought of his helpless mother and the still missing Margaret made him quickly shake his head, casting the terrifying idea out of his mind. Over the following month, the company underwent liquidation. After the entire process was completed, the building ultimately changed hands. And the Owen family vanished from the upper echelons of society. With nowhere else to go, he remembered the marital home he had shared with Margaret. At the time, he had loved Margaret with all his heart, so he had bought 2 villas and registered them under her name. At the time of the divorce, Margaret found these villas dirty and therefore never reclaimed them. He directly returned the villa to him. Since it was considered property under Margaret's name, these villas were not seized. He arranged Ronald's mom in one of them, then he drove to the villa in the suburbs. Since he drugged Megan and those thugs and left them here, he never bothered with them again. Later, according to the guarding bodyguards, Megan stabbed several of them to death with a knife after she woke up. He originally intended to send her to prison, but she was diagnosed with a mental illness just before incarceration. Reluctantly, he had no choice but to continue keeping her locked up here, in the villa. When Megan saw the news of Owen's family bankruptcy on TV, she burst into hysterical laughter again. Just then, the villa door was pushed open from the outside. A tall figure slowly walked in. The moment she saw that person, the deeply ingrained fear made her entire body begin to tremble. But then suddenly remembered the Owen family had already gone bankrupt, and the person before her had no power or influence, not worth fearing at all. Thinking of this, a trace of a relieved and sarcastic smile curled at the corner of her mouth. "Ronald, you've come to this day too." Ronald was dressed in shabby clothes, yet the fierce aura between his brows hadn't diminished in the slightest. "You're still not dead yet." Two enemies met, their eyes burning with hatred. Megan recalled the night she was gang-raped by over a dozen men, and a surge of immense hatred suddenly welled up in her chest. She grabbed the fruit knife beside her and lunged to stab him. But he dodged sideways. The next second, he snatched the knife from her hand and pinned her forcefully to the ground. He slapped her without hesitation, but an angry shout suddenly came from outside the door. "Stop it!" Ronald's mom watched the scene unfold, her vision going dark. Quickly rescued Megan from Ronald's restraint. "What are you doing?" Ronald looked coldly at his mother. The patience he once had now completely gone from his eyes. "Mom, you shouldn't have interfered." Ronald's mom slapped him hard on the back. "If I don't step in now, you're going to kill my grandchild's mother, my daughter-in-law." The man's eyelids twitched violently, and a sense of foreboding washed over him. "Mom, what do you mean?" Ronald's mom carefully helped Megan back to her room. Only then did she turn to look at him, her eyes full of calculation. It turned out that ever since Owen's family went bankrupt and Ronald's dad was imprisoned, Ronald's mom realized how few people were left in her family, although there was already one grandson, but it still wasn't lively enough, so they thought of Megan again. Back then, she had been willing to bear a child for their family for just $1 million. Nowadays Ronald's mom is willing to take out a little more from the money she secretly saved. Let her give birth to another grandson for herself. Ronald's mom had considered finding someone else, but given their family's current status, the wealthy looked down on them, while they themselves looked down on those without money. After all the calculations, it's still more cost-effective to have Megan give birth. Ronald hurriedly stopped her. "Mom, I won't have a child with her." He was just about to reveal everything about Megan's recent years. A figure suddenly rushed out from the room and hugged Ronald's mom's leg. "Auntie, I'm willing to." "Megan." Ronald raised his hand to throw her out, but was quickly blocked by Ronald's mom who shielded her. "Ronald, Mom, do you know how filthy she is? How could I possibly touch such a disgusting woman?" Megan continued to cling to Ronald's mom's leg, wailing, "No, Auntie, I'm not dirty." In the confrontation between the two, Ronald's mom quickly pieced together what she believed to be the truth. She slapped her son hard. "You marrying that hen that can't lay eggs was one thing. But now you're going to betray a woman who genuinely loves you. How could you be just like your father?" Because Ronald's dad had an affair, Ronald's mom now absolutely won't allow her son to let down such a good woman again. Seeing that it was impossible to reason with Ronald's mom, Ronald slammed the door and left directly. The two remaining women were left staring at each other. Megan quickly pinched her own thigh and looked pitifully at Ronald's mom. "Auntie, what should we do next?" Ronald's mom gently patted her shoulder reassuringly. "Don't worry, I have plenty of ideas." Sure enough, within 3 days, Ronald's mom fell ill. Hearing the faint, dying voice on the other end, Ronald returned to the villa. As soon as he opened the door, a sudden pain shot through the back of his head. His vision went black, and he collapsed to the ground. While he was unconscious, someone pried his mouth open and forced water down his throat. No, when he woke up again, he was lying on the bed completely naked, and lying beside her, also completely naked and covered in red marks, was Megan. It was like a bolt from the blue. He froze completely on the spot. At that moment, the woman, hearing the commotion, slowly opened her eyes. Seeing him awake, she curled her lips into a smile. "Ronald, we've slept together again." As if triggered by some switch, Ronald's eyes moved. The next instant, his hand abruptly seized the woman's neck, tightening forcefully. Looking for death, her hands clawed at his arm, trying to break free, but it was in vain. Megan, her face grew increasingly pale, and she gradually found it harder and harder to breathe. "No, don't." Just as he was pinning the woman against the wall by her neck, the room door was Ronald's mom barged open once again. In the midst of the chaos, Ronald couldn't catch his breath, felt his vision go black, and collapsed backward. This farce quickly reached Morgan's ears, and he couldn't wait to make an overseas call. He wanted to share this good news with someone. At a manor somewhere in North Carolina, USA, a beautiful woman, bathed in the morning sunlight, was cheerfully watering the roses in the garden with a hose. The sunlight refracted through the clear water, casting a colorful rainbow. It couldn't help but lift one's mood. A pleasant ringtone sounded from the phone on the table not far away. The woman handed the hose to the servant beside her, then took a handkerchief from another servant to dry her hands. She then walked over and picked up the phone. The moment the call connected, Morgan's excited voice came through from the other end. "Sis, great news." Margaret leisurely lay back in the rocking chair beside her, a smile curling at the corners of her lips. "Bro, what's the good news this time?" Ever since her parents brought her to the United States for treatment a year ago, she had settled down with them and had no plans to return to her home country for the rest of her life. Those experiences were too painful, and she didn't want to recall them, but she was more than willing to listen to Ronald and Megan's misfortunes, as it was the only source of amusement during her recovery. She picked up the drink on the table and took a sip while listening with great interest to the exaggerated description from Morgan on the other end of the phone. That bastard was originally resistant to sleeping with Megan, but his mother hardened her heart and directly drugged him. That bitch was protected by his mother after getting pregnant, and he couldn't see her at all. He just lay around the villa drinking all day. The only annoying thing was that he kept calling your name while drunk. Margaret frowned, a flicker of displeasure crossing her heart, perhaps sensing her unhappiness. Morgan on the other end of the phone quickly comforted her. "But don't worry, I secretly had someone break into the villa and beat him up. His face is so swollen he can't even speak." The woman burst out laughing. At that moment, the maid approached and softly signaled to her, "Miss, it's time for your facial restoration." Hearing this, the person on the other end of the phone quickly made to hang up. "Hurry along then, I won't disturb you any further." After putting away the phone, Margaret followed the maid's lead to the beauty room. After changing into a bathrobe, she lay down on the bed and closed her eyes. Although her injured face had fully recovered under the doctor's treatment half a year ago, her parents still weren't at ease and insisted she undergo facial restoration treatments twice a week. A servant put on medical gloves and began cleansing her face, applying ointment, and giving her a massage. Another servant stood nearby, softly reading out her schedule for the upcoming week. After her older brother returned to manage the Moore family's business back home, the operations in the United States were handed over to her to manage. To help her build more connections, her parents have specially arranged an auction for her next weekend. Many prominent figures in the industry have been specifically invited. Therefore, she needs to prepare in advance. After finishing her facial contouring, the maid then led her to the walk-in closet. The 5 designers had been waiting for a long time. They would take her measurements and then design a unique dress, style, hairstyle, jewelry, and makeup for her. Soon, it was the day of the auction. Although it was called an auction, it was actually a large gathering. In the bustling and lively banquet hall, the lights were brilliant, glasses clinked together, and the aroma of wine spilled from the colliding glasses, drifting through the noisy crowd. The impeccably dressed waiters served silently, ensuring every guest could fully enjoy the pleasure of the feast. Amid the soothing and melodious music, Margaret wore a red dress, the ruby necklace around her neck sparkling brilliantly. She raised her glass from afar, nodding to the guest across from her, then turned to engage in conversation with another guest. The lights in the hall gradually dimmed as the guests, guided by the attendants, took their seats. They looked toward the stage with anticipation, their eyes fixed on the auction items. Soon, the first auction item was unveiled by the attendant. The moment it was revealed, it drew gasps of amazement from the crowd. The Moore family's business is primarily in the jewelry sector. After generations of inheritance, the Moore family possesses countless treasures, any one of which is priceless. And the first item is a set of emerald headwear. The starting bid is 300 million. Each bid increases by 50 million. After the official gavel strike, the guests raised their bidding paddles one after another. The auction proceeded smoothly and soon reached the finale item. The auctioneer beside her signaled. Margaret then stood up, lifted the hem of her dress, and gracefully walked toward the stage. Taking the microphone from the auctioneer, she began to introduce the final item. This final piece is the very first work I designed when I first entered the world of jewelry. Because I poured most of my heart and soul into it, it holds extraordinary significance. The proceeds from the sale of this piece will be used to establish a fund to support those who wish to pursue their design dreams. After speaking, she lifted the red cloth covering the piece. A ring crafted from sapphire immediately caught everyone's attention. The microphone returned to the auctioneer's hand. Margaret also took her seat again. Soon, the final round of bidding began, with round after round of price increases. This piece quickly exceeded its intrinsic value. The bidding is still ongoing. 100 million, 120 million. She followed the voice and quickly spotted a familiar face. Young Master Fu, Leonard. He was the chief physician who treated her when she was disfigured, and also her suitor. Just as she was about to frown and interrupt the auction, the auctioneer's gavel fell before she could. Congratulations to this Mr. Leonard for winning this piece. Amid the applause of the crowd, Leonard took the box containing the diamond ring and waved it toward her. Stars twinkled. Margaret stood smiling at the front door, carefully seeing each guest off one by one. As the last guest's car disappeared from sight, she let out a long sigh and looked at the man beside her. Mr. Leonard. She was about to speak when the man in front of her interrupted. Call me Leonard. Margaret did not pay any attention, but insisted stubbornly. Mr. Leonard, the final auction item today. The price you paid far exceeds its actual value. If you are willing, I can. Margaret, perhaps because he saw her stubbornly addressing him as Mr. Leonard. The man's eyes looked a bit hurt. I don't care whether it exceeds its actual value or not, as long as it's yours or something you like. No matter how much it costs, I'm happy to pay. She looked up at him, truly unable to understand how he could have fallen in love with her at first sight. To avoid future trouble, she decided to make things clear. Mr. Leonard, as you know, I've had a very painful and humiliating marriage, so I don't want to start a new relationship. The determination in her words undoubtedly pained the man, but facing someone he loved, he didn't want to give up so easily, so he looked at her firmly. It's okay, I can wait, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, or 20 years, I can wait. Margaret gave a bitter smile. No matter how long you wait, it's useless. My last relationship went through 12 years of childhood friendship and 5 years of marriage, and in the end, it still ended in a complete mess. Mr. Leonard, don't wait for me anymore, there's no future for us. After saying that, she turned around to leave, but her hand was grabbed by the man. When she looked back, she met his deep and determined gaze. Margaret, I don't know what your ex was like, but I can promise you this about myself: I'll stay faithful from beginning to end. As if hearing some hilarious joke, she laughed until tears streamed down her face. Only after a long while did she finally wipe her tears and pull her hand away from the man's grasp. He made the same promise back then, yet still ended up cheating later. Men's words are just for listening, never take them seriously. This time, he did not stop her from leaving. It wasn't until she had been gone for a long time that he turned and disappeared into the night. After returning to her room, Margaret began packing her luggage. She was preparing to go to the mining area in Africa to collect samples. Just in case, she had prepared 2 phones. While charging the old phone after turning it on, the ringtone suddenly rang out. Looking at the caller ID displayed on the screen, her face instantly darkened. He finally let out a long sigh, with a swipe of his finger. He answered the call. Hello. There was a crash from the other end, as if something had been knocked over, followed by a series of rapid, heavy breaths. Just as she was about to hang up the phone, a trembling, uncertain voice came from the other end. Margaret, since that one reckless night, Megan had been protected by Ronald's mom. He simply had no chance to get close to her. let alone get rid of the child in her womb. In unbearable agony, he could only shut himself inside the villa. Drowning in alcohol all day long, then clutching the bottle and slurring her name in a drunken haze. Perhaps even the heavens found his state repulsive, for during one of his drunken stupors, they sent him tumbling down the stairs. His entire face swelled so badly he couldn't speak. Only then did he fall silent. Until today, Megan prematurely gave birth again and was brought to the hospital by Ronald's mom, because the father's signature was needed. He was brought over by someone sent by Ronald's mom. To prevent him from hurting Megan again, Ronald's mom accompanied her into the delivery room this time, leaving him alone sitting outside, staring at the 3 bright red characters outside the delivery room. He couldn't help but wonder what might have been if none of it had happened back then. Would it be Margaret lying in there now, with him accompanying her as a first-time father? Or perhaps she would be too scared to let him stay, ordering him to wait outside. Would he then be like all the other first-time fathers, facing the white wall, silently praying for her and their child's safety? Thinking it over, he took out his phone again and dialed that number that could never get through, but this time, the call connected. He was so moved that tears streamed down his face, his mouth opened and closed repeatedly. There were so many things he wanted to say, yet he didn't know where to begin. After a long time, he finally uttered 2 words with a trembling voice: Margaret. It took him a whole year to say those 2 words to that person again. The other person remained silent. Those 2 words seemed to have triggered some kind of mechanism, and he poured out all his regrets in a rush. Saying that I shouldn't have betrayed her by having an affair, even more so, I shouldn't have had a child with the other woman, I shouldn't have claimed to love her while sweet-talking another woman, and I especially shouldn't have personally destroyed her hope. He rambled on, and in the end, he knelt directly on the ground, crying and slapping himself in the face. He said he knew he was wrong and that he had changed. He asked Margaret if she could give him another chance. But he paused for a long time, and there was not a sound from the other side. Margaret, Margaret, he frantically called out her name, but there was still silence on the other end. Ronald panicked and pulled the phone away, only to realize that she had hung up at some point. He dialed again and found that her phone was turned off once more. A desperate cry of despair escaped from his throat. He knew there was no longer any chance between them. The loud noise drew the attention of everyone around. Mr. Ronald, you've finally come to the hospital. The doctor approached him and handed him a report from a long time ago. Last time you and your wife had a physical examination together, but due to confidentiality reasons, your wife couldn't see your report results or take them with her. Since you happen to be at the hospital this time, you might as well take the report with you. Ronald thanked him and took it. But the moment he saw the report results, his eyes suddenly widened in shock. Just then, a wail came from the delivery room, followed immediately by a sharp scream. He looked at the operating room in horror. Soon, the door burst open from the inside. The unconscious Ronald's mom and the postpartum Megan were wheeled out by nurses one after another, followed closely by a nurse holding a swaddled baby. Seeing him, the nurse looked puzzled. Are you sure you are the child's father? Ronald recalled the conclusion in the report and closed his eyes in pain. Finally, he forced himself to look at the child in the swaddling clothes. With just one glance, he stumbled backward and fell into a chair. His sperm quality was too weak. He simply couldn't father a child. So Megan's first child wasn't his either. A bitter laugh escaped from his lips. It eventually turned into a fit of wild laughter. Damn it, his life was completely ruined. After laughing for who knows how long, he slowly stood up, a flicker of ruthlessness flashing in his eyes. Finally, he walked step by step toward Megan's hospital room. She had no idea how much time had passed. A painful scream suddenly rang out, then abruptly stopped. Then came the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. The 2 nurses at the station exchanged terrified glances and immediately rushed toward Megan's hospital room. The moment the door was pushed open, the 2 nurses instantly screamed, "Someone's dead." The end.